I'd like to tell you a story about empowerment. And for the fear of embarrassing someone, I'm not going to mention names of companies or individuals. But it's a true story that happened to me. There was a company. It wasn't really located in a remote area, but it was in a rural area. And they were going to have some work done, and they had notified certain companies to issue a proposal for the work. The company that I worked for decided that they would bid on the contract, and they worked for at least a month putting together a great proposal. But they had worked right up to the last minute. The proposal was due the following day that the proposal was completed by the team, by at least 5 o'clock, when they were going to accept the bids. So when they completed that evening, they put the proposal in a cardboard box and taped it up and gave it to a secretary to take down to meet the freight company, the express company, that would come in, that would guarantee that the package would be delivered the next day before 5 o'clock. Well, this secretary was really a beautiful girl, and when the freight guy came in, evidently he was taken back with her, and they struck up a conversation, and she put the box on the little container place that you would put those boxes to be shipped, and they struck up a conversation, and he left the building and forgot the box and left it laying there, and she didn't see it there as she walked off. So it stayed there the whole night. The next morning, when some of the people came in, especially some of the secretaries, they found the box. And when I walked in, you could see fear in the eyes of the people standing around looking at this box. And I asked what the problem was, and they said, well, this is supposed to be at that company today by 5 o'clock, and now it was like 8 o'clock in the morning. And I said, well, you better not stand around with it. You better take it to Mahogany Row, and that's what we call the major managers of the company, because they all had mahogany desks. So we said, called it Mahogany Row. So I said, you better go up there and talk to somebody and let them know. And when I said that, you could see even more fear come into their face, because they sure didn't want to go up there with that box and tell the story. So as they left, I instantly ran in, got on the telephone, and called a friend of mine who was an instructor at an airport, a small county airport near where I lived. And I asked him, I said, I told him where I wanted to go, and he said, let me look on the map. And he said, well, there's a little small airport there. I said, can you get me there by 5 o'clock this evening? He said, there's absolutely no way. He said, there's weather in the area. He said, the only way that you could get there is with a jet. And I said, well, who's got a jet? So he gave me the major airport, and he knew a man over there. He said, you call him. And he said, you tell him that I told you to call. So I did, and when they answered the phone, I said, have you got a jet available? And they said, yes, sir, we have. And I said, well, I want to lease it for the day. I said, I'll be there as soon as I can get there. And I hung up the phone. And then I called up on Mahogany Row, and the secretary up there answered, and I said, I have a jet rented, and I'll take that package to where it's going. And there was a long pause, like, you rented a jet? And I heard them say, so-and-so has rented a jet, and then I could hear the manager in the background said, well, if he's got a jet available, what are you doing standing here? Get the package to him. So they brought it down. And I went over to the airport. Now here I show up with a cardboard box with no money, and I have leased a jet, and they had it ready. And one of the pilots was a retired Navy. He had been a Navy pilot. I don't know if he was retired or not. So I got on the airplane, and some of the people who worked for our company were famous people. I mean, they were known worldwide, and I started dropping names because I could tell the way they were looking at me. I mean, here I am going to a little airport that they could barely get into with a jet, with a cardboard box, and they didn't know me from Adam, so I had to drop names or something. So we got on the jet and took off, and I thought, well, you know, I mean, I'm en route, and I know that I'm legitimate, so why not be a little stealthy with this thing just to give it a little more dramatization with the pilots, which I did. So when I left, the last thing I heard one of my colleagues say was, I'll have somebody meet you at that little airport, because at that time I knew what airport we would be going into. I said, fine. So on the way, I knew my mission would be over once I landed at the airport. So we continued on with the trip, and when they called the local, not the control tower, but I forget what they call it, but it's a local communications. And when this airplane came over on their radio, the response, I could tell that the guy was thinking, what is a jet doing coming in here? And so when we landed, we taxied up, and I got out with my pasteboard box, and there was this old beat-up automobile sitting there. And a guy who looked like he was a throwback from the hippie days standing there waiting for the box. So reluctantly, I gave it to him, and he looked at me like, why are you giving me this? And but he knew my name. He said, and he said my name, and I said, yes, that's who I am. So he took the box and left. So I figured that I had completed my mission. So I went into the airport there, or it was like a little trailer at this little county airport, and I called back to the office to talk to the person that was supposed to have this person to meet me. And I said, well, I've delivered the box. And there was a long pause, and they said, well, that wasn't anybody from the company. That was a taxi driver. And I said, taxi driver? You didn't tell me anything about a taxi driver going to meet me for this box. So I thought, okay, here we have. I've rented a jet, and I have flown all this distance, landed at a little airport, and I had two pilots standing there waiting on me to take me back to where I was going to go. And here the box is gone with who knows who. So I sat down on the steps, and the two pilots, they were still trying to figure out what in the world is going on. And I was about to cry because I knew it was all over with for me. And I was trying to figure out how I would even get back to the state where I lived, because I definitely was not going back on that jet. And I was not going back to the company that was paying my salary. So shortly after that, the old dilapidated car pulled back up, and the guy got out, and he said, I stopped to call my wife, and said somebody called and said that I wasn't supposed to get this box, that I was supposed to get you. I said, well, okay. So I hopped in his car, and the back seat was, it looked like that he had wrecked the car, and the back seat had been destroyed, and he had just found a seat and put in there, and that's what I was sitting on. And I mean, you couldn't even lean back, and one of the windows was broken out of the car. So I told him where I was going. He said, okay, here we go. So we started out, and he said, now where is this company? And I said, well, have you ever been there? And he said, well, I think a long time ago I was working for a soft drink company, and we went out there and filled up a drink container. And I'm thinking, oh no. So we continued down the road, and I didn't know what to do. And I was sitting there with my cardboard box in my lap. And we were going down the road, and off to the left, I saw a place that looked like kind of a little rescue squad building, or, you know, there looked like there was one emergency vehicle sitting off to the side. And there was a police car sitting there in the parking lot. So I told this driver, I said, stop right here, will you? And so he pulled in, and I got out, got my box, and I walked in the building, and it was empty, but I could hear somebody talking. So the place was kind of dark, and I went around a corner, and in a long hallway there was looked like a pay telephone, and this policeman was standing there talking on the telephone. And I said, excuse me, I said, I'd like to ask you something. So whoever he was talking to, he said, hold on just a minute. So when he looked at me, and I said, if you've ever done a favor for anybody in your whole life, I said, I need a favor. And he said, well, what's the problem? And I said, I have got to get this box. And I mentioned the company. And if I could tell you what the company did, you would say, oh, okay. And he said, sure, I can get you there. So we went out, and I went over to the taxi driver, and whatever money I had in my pocket, I just gave it to him. And I got into the police car, and we started out. And by that time, the people from the company that I work for was trying to figure out where I was at. So they were on the phone with the guard at the gate of the company where I was going as I pulled up in the police car and got out, and the guard said, oh, he's here, he just pulled up with the police. And somebody at the company that I was working for said, oh, he just pulled up in a police car. And then it went like wildfire through the company that I had been arrested because they probably thought I was dealing in contraband, since I came into this little airport in a jet with a cardboard box. But anyway, to make a long story short, and this story has gotten too long, but I wanted to tell it. It was like 4:55 or 4:20 or something like that before the deadline, when the manager at that plant signed my paper that he had received the proposal. So then I called my main boss at Mahogany Row, and I told him, I said, mission accomplished. And he said, well, he said, everything's a buzz here. He said, you can just tell us the story when you get back. So one of the engineers at the company where I had delivered the proposal said, I'll take you back down to the airport, because this was quite a few miles away. And the two pilots of the jet still had no clue as to what was going on. They had not been paid for their jet. They did not know anything. So I came back, and the two pilots were waiting on me. We hopped in the aircraft and skirted thunderstorms trying to get out of there. And we had to land in another state to refuel, because they were going to have to refuel to get back to our destination. And this was a large airport. And while we was there, they called their main office, and their manager said, someone just walked in here and gave us a certified check for the full amount of this aircraft. So he came up to me, and he said, we have been paid for the rental of this aircraft. And then on the way back, we became friends, and I kept, I told him a little bit about what was going on and the company that I work for. And I don't know what happened to the two people that were involved in leaving the package, and I really didn't want to know whether they had lost their job or not. But that next morning, the company that left the package, that was supposed to deliver the package, came in with a certified check, or a check from their company, for the full amount of the cost to deliver that package to where was going. And you know what the bad part of that story is? The company that I work for did not did not get the contract. So that's a story on empowerment, to where I took it on my own to rent a jet airplane, and came close to just dropping out because I knew I had lost my job. Well, thank you very much for listening to that. We'll see you. Bye-bye.